So welcome to the Seattle Angel Conference Workshop Series. We are lucky today to have Jason Yeh coming and talking about his efforts. But before we do that, I want to introduce myself. I'm John Seacrest. I try to make startup ecosystems move faster. We do the open coffee. We do the Lean Startup Seattle to convince people to do customer development before product development. We do the Angel Conference to engage in creating new angel investors. And we have a peer learning group for fund managers who are trying to move their angel investing to be more professional. So in the process of looking at things, we have 9 angel groups in the Seattle area. And one of the common things that I see happen is that they throw a profile together, they send the application to everybody, and then they wonder why nobody wants to do anything with them. And so there's these habits that people have, which maybe the best way to say is the habits get in their way. And so thinking a little bit strategically about how you're doing your fundraising makes a lot of difference. And when we're doing early stage fundraising, the more early it is, the more I think trust and relationship has a factor to play. And we'll talk a little bit with Jason about his thoughts about this whole fundraising process. But one thing before we start, I'm going to record this like I'm doing now, and we're going to put it on our YouTube channel. And so you'll be able to find our things in our YouTube. Oh, Jason got that, but nobody else. One of the things about Zoom that I don't like is that you type something in and then all of a sudden it goes to the last person that talked to you. All right, so there's the recording where we keep all of our recordings. Some of those are fantastic recordings, so they're worth at least exploring. And this one will end up there in about a week. So Jason, you have this idea of making fundraising a little bit more effective for entrepreneurs. Maybe you could sort of give people a context of how you got to that idea and then dive right in. And for everybody else, if you go to the upper right and you select speaker view, you'll get a better picture of Jason as he's going through things.
Totally. Well, John, thanks so much for inviting me, and really glad to see all these great faces joining us. I know it's evening time, dinner time for a lot of people. So the fact that you're carving this out shows me how important this is to you. And just want to applaud John and the rest of his group for the types of events that he throws. The things that he describes are incredibly needed. And I think what you find is that in the startup journey, there's so much that feels like it would be easy, but is very, very hard. And a lot of it is counterintuitive. And a lot of it sort of flies in the face of everything you learned and sort of more traditional paths going through school, working at big companies. So the more you can ask for help, the more you can engage in groups like this and just try to better yourself and educate yourself before jumping in, the faster you're going to get to the answer, the faster you'll improve, which is one of those things that everyone looks for in a great startup and a great investment. So I'm going to start sharing screen. Before I do that, just know that this is a very interactive presentation and workshop. I've done it over 10 times around the world. It's very well received, and it works best when people aren't shy about raising their hands and engaging. And if you guys are shy, I'm very happy to cold call you and call you out to start engaging. Otherwise, none of us will learn. So do you guys all know how to use the digital hands, the reactions at the bottom? Okay, that's how I'll be able to call on you. So I'm going to start screen sharing. I'll try to pop back and forth so you can talk to me directly here and there, but let's see. Y'all see this title screen, Fundraising Unlocked?
Yep, looks good.
Amazing. Okay. So I'm going to give you a little background on me. And this is not to credential myself necessarily or brag about anything. It's really to give you context. So I spent a number of years as the head of new media products at MLB. Was that you, John? Yeah.
No, it wasn't, but I'll work on putting mute on everyone else.
Okay, sorry. Spent a number of years as the head of new media products at MLB.com. Later on, I was an investor at Greycroft Partners, which is a venture capital firm based out of New York and LA. After 4 years of leading investments there, I started a company called Tape, which actually I ran into one of your members here while being co-founder and CEO of Tape, were raised a couple $1 million from top investors. After a small exit in 2020, actually transitioned to figure out how I wanted to spend my time. And I really was attracted to this idea of supporting a community that I felt really close to, that I felt I knew the struggles of, which is the founder community. And having understood one of the biggest challenges, fundraising on both sides of it, I decided to focus on that 100%. So I was Silicon Valley Bank's internal fundraising coach. And then I launched a company called Adamant, which I'm running today. We try at scale to make fundraising easier and more accessible to as many founders as possible. Do that through a lot of different things, including workshops like this. I have a podcast called Funded, and a bunch of other things you can discover throughout some of my profiles. So I give you that background because I always lead in a presentation like this with this caveat. So feel free to spend time reading this as I give you some backtrack. What I believe is in fundraising, startups overall, but fundraising in particular, if you go around trying to find advice around any given topic, you're liable to find two equally credible people that will give you 180 degrees exact opposite pieces of advice. Now, what's important to note about this is if you look at this actual example, Andrea Funston from Basecamp Ventures and Mark Suster from Upfront are talking about data rooms and when to share data rooms. And they are in these tweets and in these messaging and blog posts are saying the exact opposite thing. Andrea says that that founders should be sharing data rooms immediately. The first time they run into an investor, share the data room. And Mark Suster in this blog post says you should never share data rooms. Now, what's important to note is that if these two investors broke bread and talked about this topic, they probably would agree on a lot of different things. It's just the way that advice is given. And it's so important for all of you to, one, understand the context behind where people have come up with their opinions and why, which is why I give you the full sort of slide on me and background. So you have a sense for whether or not you want to believe what I have to say. And then the second encouragement is that everyone should be asking follow-up questions. When someone gives you advice, whether it's fundraising, startup related, or life related, ask more questions, understand how they've come about this one soundbitey piece of advice so that you can determine whether or not to follow it or follow an alternative or a slight alteration on that. Okay. So first question for everyone, I wanted to see what people think fundraising is. Just, and this is not a trick question. It's just meant to get the creative and sharing juices flowing. Who wants to raise their hand or who wants to be cold called?
Feel free to go through the list.
All right. No, I see no hands. So, but oh, there we go. Alan, thanks for volunteering. What do you think fundraising is? Oh, I think you're muted. Alan, you're muted.
Thank you. Fundraising is all about finding the smart money, which means you get both the input, which will move you forward, as well as the funding, which will lubricate the gears.
Nice.
It's a
Okay.
combination. It's not one piece or the other. It's both consistently.
Right. Very good. So Alan's talking a little bit about the important parts of fundraising, trying to find a great partner. What about the actual practice of fundraising? What about the motion that you have to go through? What is fundraising to you? Oh, Michael got scared off, but I might still call on you, Michael. What do you think fundraising is? Like, what does that look like to you?
Work.
Work. 100%. I think that,
I look at it, fundraising is money for capital investment. So.
Right. Great. And last one, David, can you give me your take on what fundraising is?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's work, but it can be a distraction. Money is so important to your job, but also your job is to, deliver your company. So you have to be careful about to get too over obsessed with funding. Very good.
Very good. It is hard work. It is a distraction. It isn't, it feels like it's not core to your business, but we're going to talk a little bit about the components of it that are really important. Ken threw in the chat selling. We're going to talk about that too. It's a big part of it. John, did you want to throw in anything?
No, I was
Okay.
going to go down the selling part of it. It's a sales process.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's also a partnership relationship building process where you're doing the whole marriage with kids thing kind of engagement.
Amazing. Larry, I see the hand up. I'm going to keep going just so that we don't get cut off, but everyone was saying good things, good positive things, which I like. What I didn't hear was what I hear often, which is great. A lot of people think about fundraising as, especially when they come to a talk like this, they're like, what's the key? What's the thing that will allow me to trick Bill Donaldson, the venture capitalist, to give me money? What's the thing that'll, trick Corey to give me money as a venture capitalist? The thing about fundraising is it's not about what are the tactics that will make someone all of a sudden believe that they need to invest. Fundraising is not about tricking people into giving you money. And in fact, like if there's nothing else that you walk away from this talk about, except for this, I'll feel like I was successful, that fundraising shouldn't happen if you're not worth it. In fact, if you go through any of my content, if you spend more time with me, I know exactly what it takes to convince an investor to invest. And a lot of times I warn people that if you get really close to this type of content, you'll be good at it and you'll have a better opportunity and a better chance of convincing someone to give you money. But I really want to protect against this because you don't want to take other people's money to run a business if you aren't doing it for the right reasons. Fundraising is really about demonstrating that you're an entrepreneur, a founder, a leader that is running a really great business, something that you believe in, and then having investors discover that. That's what I believe fundraising is. If you're jumping into fundraising, trying to trick people or like mind game someone into giving money to a business that you don't care about, you're going to sign up for a lot of pain that you just don't need to be signing up for. And so I'll leave that line of thinking right there, but make sure everyone reassesses what fundraising is to them and what your company is to you. Okay. So the last thing I said about fundraising is fairly new to me. I've been playing around with it, but the thing and illustration that I always put forward for people to really understand what the shift in thinking that unlocks a lot of dollars is this. A lot of people come to fundraising thinking it's like asking people for money, going to find people who have money and then saying, will you give me money? But in the game that we're playing right now, fundraising is really about demonstrating that you're an amazing opportunity, that you're an amazing founder, an amazing bet, and then allowing investors to see that and then start chasing you. That's when fundraising works the best. And once you start peeling back the layers of why that is, that's when you become a really great fundraiser. That's how you unlock fundraising. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about what the steps to making this shift occur are. And we'll go through 4 different phases in a nice high overview that gets you as far down the road as possible. So we'll talk about founder mindset. We'll talk about investor psychology, killer narrative, and then preparation and process. There's going to be some motivational content in here, but also some very action-oriented tips and strategies. So I encourage you to take notes, encourage you to remember the YouTube link that John has in case you want to come back to this. Okay. So another interactive piece here. Get ready to volunteer. Would love to talk to someone quickly one-on-one about what their company is and why they're doing it.
So Alan and Bill and Michael are all people that have engaged in the Angel Conference recently.
Is that
Ken as well? Ken, oh good. That's good. They should have it on the tip of their tongues.
Oh, I see. Okay. I didn't know if you were saying not to call on them or.
No. I see 3 hands up now.
Great. We'll go down the road. Justin, it looks like you were the first. Can you tell me just 30 seconds, actually, for the rest of the people, I heard you describe it to me. For the rest of the people, maybe 15, 30 seconds on what you do, and then tell me why you've decided to do this.
Yeah, the thing that I do is I want to help companies make products that customers love. And the reason I'm doing it is because in the past, I've been in charge of product, and we've made we've made products that customers did not love. And the key thing that I learned is customer research that really helps you understand how to build products is a waterfall method. And I wanted to make agile customer research so that anybody can do this process.
Okay. Very cool. You want to make agile customer research that anyone can apply. Why is that important to you?
It's important to me because most businesses, it's important on two reasons. One, it absolves some personal pain. And two, from in the past, sort of being an expert in an area and realizing that, I felt like I was unable to bring that expertise into the product in a way that, made us successful. But two, then the sort of emergent altruistic value is just, if I can help more people be successful, then the greater diversity of companies will be able to succeed instead of, the 95% of companies failing. And that is just generally good for the world.
Okay. One more why. The first of those two, why was that pain or that itch? Why is that important to you to solve?
I guess it's some amount of like proving worth to the world, maybe.
Okay.
Vulnerable to say.
No, that's good. I'm going to do that same exercise with one more. The names are not coming up. Brunette woman with glasses. She's the only one. Sorry, your name isn't coming up.
Hi, Corey.
Hi, Corey. What are you working on?
So I'm a founder of a sustainable sportswear company. And so our mission is proving that the best gear on the planet can also be the best gear for the planet. So yeah, one of the reasons that we're doing that, when I say that, there's a lot of greenwashing in the industry. So there's a lot of stuff that's complete crap, like recycled polyester is taking more energy than it builds, like merino wool has superwash. And, as a consumer, I got frustrated with this because I used to be really athletic. And so it started, and I also worked on a lot of sports accounts like Nike and Adidas. I've run those as a creative director before. And I got frustrated with the options that were available, not just in terms of sustainability, but also in terms of performance.
Let me pause you there, and just so that we can, get to this exercise. Super interesting. Love sportswear. Love sustainability. But why is sportswear important to you?
Confidence. For me, it's I really believe in helping people be healthier every day. I think it has so much effect on your mentality. It's had so much effect on my life. And I think the more that we can make that enjoyable and good for people, the more they'll like doing it, and the healthier people will be, and the happier the world will be, right? In a little way, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And so, I remember seeing women in the gym who were overweight, who were just in, yoga pants. I have a whole rant on which I won't go into, but, they're forcing women into these like awful things that aren't even very effective, but they're really cheap to make. And so that scares anybody who already doesn't have the body for the gym away from the gym, makes it an intimidating place, and makes people want to not be as healthy as they could. So there's a whole lot of reasons around this, but that's one of them.
Great. I know a lot of people are volunteering, and this exercise can go on very long, which I always enjoy doing. We just have limited time. I'm going to pause the exercise there and kind of explain what I'm doing here. So it can be very easy for people to get into the startup and fundraising mentality and say like, David, why are you doing this? And you're like, the market size and the TAM is incredibly large, and we have an opportunity to make a lot of money and capture with the best product. And that's something that any MBA, anyone that follows me online or anything like that can regurgitate. But that's not what an early stage investor is going to be looking for. And it's really important for everyone to better understand the answer to the question, why are you doing this? Because if it's not done explicitly, if it's not done the way I did it, likely won't be, It's going to be done implicitly. And I'll tell you, the best investors I know have either been explicitly trained on this or just through thousands of iterations, thousands of losses, and a handful of really big wins are looking for what I call, actually, it's not my term, what has been described as purity of motivation. This is something that I think is really important for people to better understand about themselves, because it is one of those things that will push a founder through when the hardest times hit them. It's going to be the thing that keeps them curious and interested and engaged and wanting to improve and make a company better, make themselves better as leaders. And if you don't have purity of motivation, if you're doing things for the wrong reasons, which, by the way, I can describe in great detail because I've been through now 3 different startups, and 2 of them I was doing for the wrong reasons. And because I'm an excellent fundraiser, I was able to raise money for 2 of them. But it didn't end in a great situation for me. It ended in, years of work that I wasn't enjoying myself. And because of that, I wasn't really pushing the company the way it needed to be pushed. So when I asked Corey and I asked Justin, why are you doing this? Like, are you doing it because you think people don't have access to agile, customer development for their company? Or is there a fascination there? Like, is there a crazy fascination? Is there like a crazy interest? Is there something that you see that you like just want to spend every day on? And it's such a cliche. Like, it's such a cliche. And I always hesitate to even give that part of the workshop in that speech. But I've thought about this a lot. It's like, just because something is a cliche or you've heard it from 5 different people, but still roll your eyes, doesn't mean that I shouldn't tell you as well. So think about why you're doing things. Think about what purity of motivation means to you, because it's going to be something that venture capitalists, other investors will be trying to uncover. Okay, let's move on. We're going to go to investor psychology. Let's see. So investor psychology is one of those incredibly important things. One of the huge advantages that I had when I went to go raise money for multiple companies is that I had been an investor. So investor psychology to me was just being like, how would I behave in this situation? It's not going to be like that for you. So it's going to require some work. And I want to illustrate a couple things about investor psychology and why it's important. So who here has been in sales? Raise your digital hand. Somebody here has. Somebody I haven't talked to. David Jennings. David, how are you, man?
Good. How are you?
Good. So you've been in sales. Have you seen this question before?
Not in this exercise.
Okay, even better. Don't worry. There's like really not, it's not really putting you on the spot, but this is a very famous interview question for salespeople. They say, hey, David, here's a pen. Look at the pen. Sell me the pen. If I were to ask you to sell me this pen, how would you start?
I'd probably ask you something about how do you currently use a writing device today?
Awesome. Okay. You can ask me.
So I'd say, Jason, how do you currently, write on paper if you need to write?
Yeah, I usually grab it with my right hand because I'm right-handed, and then I scribble down whatever's in my head.
Do you prefer lead or do you prefer ink?
Generally prefer ink. I think it's classier.
Okay. Do you like a ballpoint or do you like just a rough, feel to it?
I'm not really sure. Yeah, I don't really know.
Okay. Do you like something that's, grippable or texture or, do you like to hold something that slides out of your hand, or do you like something that is easy to hold?
David, thanks so much for humoring me. Everyone give him applause. Thanks. By the way,
yeah, on and on, right?
So you were pretty good. Most people they start with what John was putting in the chat, which is like, look at this pen. It has the best ink possible. It's going to be the best pen you've ever seen. But actually, traditional sales training talks about really understanding the mind of the buyer. Like, the most important thing actually in sales is, if I was selling Lulu about this pen, I would say, Well, before we talk about this pen, Lulu, would love to hear a little bit more about your business. Can you tell me what you're working on? It'd be this idea of, can I understand why Lulu might need the pen? And then once I understand Lulu's motivations, the things that are important to her, then I can say, okay, well, I know that she has to produce thousands of documents a day and has to sign all of them. So I'll probably talk about how much ink this holds or how long it lasts. Okay. This is no different than fundraising. And in fundraising, it's a sales process like John and others had talked about, where the thing that you're selling is the opportunity to invest in your company. Now, the same way I wouldn't train anyone here to go sell this pen by saying, hey, like without knowing anything, just here's the pen, here's how the grip works, this is the color, this is why it's amazing, here's the brand. I wouldn't try to coach anyone to fundraise until they had a better understanding of investor psychology, because you really have to understand what they are looking for so that you don't go down the trap of saying things that aren't important, turning them off when you don't realize you are. And so it's going to be hard to cover all of this in, a short 10 minutes. I just put this out there because it's something that you can gradually work on. Usually what I tell people is start to learn quickly and do everything you can to put yourself in an opportunity to learn more about the way investors think. One of the best things you can do is just look for generally accessible knowledge sources out there. So those are like investors on Twitter, investors blog posts, newsletters, podcasts. This is obviously very self-promotional, but I believe that I produce a really good product. I have both a weekly newsletter where I go really deep on investor psychology, as well as a podcast. So check both of those out, but that's not the only, game in town. You probably heard of 20-Minute VC with Harry Stebbings. If any of you are tackling the Latin American market, there's a Latitude podcast. And then if you have access to investors yourself, buy them a coffee, talk to them, try to get smarter about this, because this is a step a lot of people skip. And because of that, they'll go into these conversations sounding like selling, ink in a pen without understanding what people need.
I would like to do a little bit of an experiment here, because I'm shocked at the results of this at times. Everybody who does not have a Twitter address and has not followed any Twitter funder, raise your hand. No, on the little thing, hit the react button. No.
Wow.
Okay, so when people apply to the Seattle Angel Conference and come into our program, we ask for your LinkedIn and then we ask for your Twitter address, and that's sort of intentional. And he led with fundraising Twitter users because they are engaging. Probably this is the most effective way to get in touch with people who are trying to raise, to invest money, is to watch them talk about their trying to invest money. And they're basically telling you what they want. It's really hard to get that information for most places. So why would you, as a person who's trying to sell to this person, not follow them and learn from them about what they're telling you that they want? So Jason, your assumption that startups are using Twitter is not what I measure. I measure about 50% come in with Twitter addresses, and 50% of those actually follow people who are doing tweeting. So I would like it if everybody who is doing anything with Twitter, like who's your favorite Twitter funder, put it into the chat so other people know where to start. I would suggest Elizabeth Yen, myself. Sorry, thank you for letting me do that.
Elizabeth is great. Now, since we're on the topic, I do find that there are some people that come to the game and they're like, I'm just so anti-social media and whatever. I get it. Like, there are parts of social media that are kind of undesirable, waste of time. I mean, I waste so much time on social media. It's crazy. Scrolling through Twitter, etc. But I'll tell you, beyond just getting knowledge yourself and potentially making connections with both venture capitalists and people that could maybe connect you to venture capitalists, which are two very, very valuable elements of social media. It's also a piece of real estate that venture capitalists will check into. And that isn't to say that if you don't have it, it's just like a ding. But if I'm thinking about investing in Nathan Towery and someone says, Larry's like, hey, you should look at this CEO. He's doing something really interesting. I don't know Nathan. I don't really know Larry that well, but I'm interested in something he said. I'm going to go Google him and I'm going to look for as much surface area as I can. So you're losing out on an opportunity if you're not sharing your thoughts on LinkedIn and Twitter, because it is just, it's a new age website for personalities and for the diligence that venture capitalists do. Okay. All right. So that was my quick foray into investor psychology. Don't sleep on it, spend time on it, learn what you can and do it as quickly as possible.
Ask a question there, Jason.
Yeah.
So I posted for John originally, but then since he was probably busy posting Twitter handles, I figure you could answer this, which is VCs are supposed to be looking for warm intros, which means they want trusted intros. They want people that have done some due diligence, they have vetted you, and then they introduce you to them, and then that's when they trust you. So how do you possibly build up a relationship on Twitter? Is it just to follow them and just sort of belong in the game and feel happy that you're at least seeing what their feeds are? What is the real, I guess, practical purpose that serves?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a couple that I'll quickly point to, and there's this idea of making a connection directly with the venture capitalists, and there's the idea of making connections with connectors, people that are connected to the venture capitalists. In both cases, just being active in their threads is more than you being not active, right? So if I've never, ever met you, Sundagar, ever before, and you email me, I've never seen your name before, it's likely that you're not going to get a response. And we did this interview with investors at Accrue Capital and Bonfire Ventures, and we're talking about the idea of warm introductions and warm connections. And the point was made that it's like, there's a stack ranking of when I'm going to spend time with someone. And if Corey is my best friend, we grew up together, and Corey introduces me to Justin Kistner, and I really respect Corey, that's top notch. That is a really, really good introduction. Now, David Jennings, who I've never, ever met before, except for he emailed me one time and I positively responded. If he introduces me to Justin, not as good. In fact, it's like I don't really know David. But I'll tell you, it's 1,000 times better than Justin just cold emailing me. So I guess the point is, if there are opportunities to engage with people, take the opportunities. And of course, don't barge in. Like, we're not saying, John and I aren't saying Twitter is this place where you can go DM Elizabeth Yin and say, hey, by the way, I have this startup, I'm raising $1 million. Can you take a picture with me, without her ever having met you before? But if she tweets something out and you loved it, and you go in her thread and say, that was amazing, that is one little ding that she'll notice the name, she'll notice the, and if the next time she tweets something, you engage more positively with additional, with additional thoughts, something that she engages in, that might as well be a digital form. That might as well be a networking event that you were able to, like, say hi to her and say a few words. Now, it's obviously time consuming, and none of us are saying you do this all the time, but startups are time consuming. The process of building an amazing company is time consuming. You're going to have to balance all these things, but social media can be a very, very powerful tool. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. All right, let's move on. We're going to talk about a killer narrative, which is a component that a lot of people want to talk about. They usually rush to that, but I think founder mindset and investor psychology is incredibly important. We'll get to a killer narrative now because everyone knows, like, hey, build a deck. I need to build a deck to pitch. The thing I'll tell people is that it's not just about building a deck, and it's not just throwing together 10 slides, whatever. It's really, really thinking through, what is the story that I'm telling here? What is my narrative? And you want to spend a lot of time on this. You want to spend a great amount of time understanding what is important to you, what goes in the narrative, and what will be compelling. Because in this process, really the journey is the destination. Super, super cheesy statement, but very, very true. The process of actually working through an amazing narrative and creating a deck that is punchy and impactful can be incredibly transformational. The analogy I give is if any of you have been to business school, you might have heard this, where it's like people would tell me the application process to business school itself is transformational. And I'd roll my eyes and be like, that's the dumbest piece of advice I've ever gotten. But then you go into it and the essays are like, well, what do you want to do with an MBA? What do you hope to do after business school? And you realize up until that point, you'd never thought about what I actually wanted to do with my career. And, that application forced me to do that. The same goes for a startup where I'm like, okay, I'd really like you to give me 10 slides on what your company does. And if I ask Jim, hey, what is that? He's never been asked to distill his company down to 10 slides. He had been describing it in 30 slides and describing it into like a 30-minute conversation, just talking about everything he could possibly do. But when I told Jim, hey, I need you to build an incredibly succinct deck that only uses 10 slides, all of a sudden now he has to decide what goes in and out of this deck. And that exercise of focusing and honing on what you're going to do first is incredibly powerful. And what I tell people is there are a lot of people that like to poo-poo venture capitalists and especially the fundraising process. It's like, oh my God, they're going to make me create a 10-slide deck. Why does it have to be 10 slides? Like, why don't I just throw 25 slides together and give them those things? They're going to make me build a model, like a financial model to describe why I'm doing my company and what the numbers go into it are. God, I haven't done that. Why do I have to do that? It's just to sound better to investors. But what I'll tell you, having been a venture capitalist and a venture-backed founder, is that there are so many things that you'll see where it's like, are you trying to do it to sound better to investors, or are you doing it to run a better business? And this is kind of a meme. I don't know if people have seen this. It's like multiple Spider-Mans pointing at each other. But the fact of the matter is, if you're doing something to sound better to investors, if what you are doing sounds better to investors, it's likely the case that it means you're running a better business, because venture capitalists are not in the game of trying to back things that sound better just because they sound better. They are in the game of backing better businesses. And if you sound like a better business, they will be more likely to invest in you. Okay. So this is a handful of the narrative frameworks that I like to share with people. It helps you think about your company in different ways and really build a narrative and build a deck that venture capitalists will actually be able to follow, and that through the process, you'll be able to actually decide what is the most important things about your company. Okay, so let's go through these. I think these are valuable things to run through. First is this idea of simply impressive. So many first-time founders that I talk to, many pitches that I get from first-time founders, sometimes it's because of imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's not knowing exactly what an investor wants to see. But oftentimes you see these founders that come in and they want to make sure that the big bad investor knows that they should be there and knows that they're good enough to run this company. And so they will overwhelm the deck and the story with lots of detail. And especially if there's anything lightly technical to the company, the technicality will come out overwhelmingly. And what I tell people is, you can't try to impress an investor with how complex and deep your knowledge is. All you're going to do is confuse them, and that gets you nowhere. What I'd rather see you do is pitch the circle, not the equation. So if there's an opportunity to do something as simply as possible and tell them, do it that way. What I explain to people is, let's say I'm pitching and, Carly, I'm pitching the famous venture capitalist Carly Rector, and I'm like, oh my God, I need to really get her to understand my climate business. And let's say I dumb it down using analogies to show her why the feed additive that I'm giving cows reduces the methane that they burp out. Like, and I'll use the terms burp instead of enteric fermentation, whatever. The worst that can happen in that situation is that Carly is an expert in enteric fermentation and sustainability and climate. And she's just like, oh, I get it. Like, go to the next slide. Now, if I flip that and I say, I'm working on this incredible startup. We focus on enteric fermentation, and the combination of 57 compounds adds this element to the digestive process of ruminants that reduces, and she has no idea what I'm talking about. I've already lost her, right? So what you want to do is avoid the feeling of I need to prove who I am, and instead impress people by being simple. Pitch the circle, not the equation. Okay. So next is show, don't tell. So the idea of show, don't tell is you get these subjective terms that go through decks all the time. And I'm always picking at people. I'm always saying, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? It's like trying to pitch Michael's talking about his oyster farm. And he's like, there are a tremendous number of oysters that are consumed every year in the United States. The problem that's facing customer development is incredibly large. It's like the biggest it's ever been, and all these terms that mean nothing to me. You really can't assume people understand what you're sizing or what you're describing. And so wherever you can, you want to be able to show, don't tell. There are a lot of problems. There's huge amounts of X, Y, and Z. The pain of this problem is so severe. Whenever you get a chance, you want to tell people you want to describe it in a story. You want to describe it in a way that anyone that doesn't have context can understand it. So if you don't have aggregate data, what you'll find is a very specific example can be incredibly impactful. So just talking about one customer journey and what they went through and why they had pain when they were trying to figure out product market fit and how they discovered it through a certain process. That allows certain concepts to really be absorbed by investors. And you lose all of that if you glaze over it using terms that don't make sense to anybody. So show, don't tell, whatever you can.
Any chance you're willing to let people try to show you in their words and not tell you in their words? I want to pick on people.
Okay, go for it. You can.
Yeah, Bill Donaldson. Can you give him the 30 seconds about what estrogenics is?
So estrogenics is a preclinical pharmaceutical development company. We're working on a safe alternative to traditional hormone replacement therapy to treat hot flashes and memory dysfunction in menopausal women.
So what does safe mean to you?
Safe means that it doesn't have the drawbacks of traditional hormone replacement therapy, which is an increased risk for breast cancer and blood clots leading to stroke.
Got it.
So you could say we get rid of hot flashes without the same risks of stroke and breast cancer.
So what I would pick at, or the way I would describe it is, I would probably describe a scenario for 70% of women over the age of 65, where they wake up in such a way that they're so uncomfortable that they sweat through their clothing, right? They sweat through their clothing. And the only way that they can actually address that today is by taking certain drugs or whatever that dramatically increase the chances of cancer in terms of like 3x or whatever. But that's just an example. And, John put me on the spot. But you can see how that's a very different way of describing the situation, because if I don't understand what it means to be menopausal, which I don't, and if I don't understand what it means to have increased cancer, like chances of getting cancer, which I only slightly do. You need to make it really understandable for me. You need to make me go, oh God, like, oh man, I can see why if somebody woke up every day and 10 times a day sweated through their shirt, they would jump to something, even if it were dangerous, but could we fix that? And that would make me think, oh, that probably is a really, really acute pain that someone would pay for. So anyways, that's a great example to go through. Thanks for playing. All right. We don't have tons of time, so I'm going to try to get through a few of my most important things. Okay. Believer matching. This is going to be another interactive example. Who would like to tell me who thinks that they know the perfect investor for their company? Like, if they could just describe that perfect investor, what would it be? So anyone want to raise their hand? Okay. Michael Irving.
Perfect investor would be environmentally minded.
Okay. What else? No, that's too easy. Like, so just so everyone knows, Michael runs a oyster farm. Sorry, I might oversimplified, but environmentally minded. Tell me more. Like, no, I'm telling you, like, the perfect investor, not like a category of investor that 100,000 investors falls into. I'm talking like one of one. Like, what would the one of one investor sound like to you?
Environmentally minded and want to be hands-on, be part of the company.
Michael, you're not going specific enough. Like, here, I'll help you. I think the perfect investor for you would be an environmentally minded investor who grew up in the Pacific Northwest, loves oysters. In fact, he loves it so much that he's traveled around the world eating and trying oysters. And in the summers, he spent time with his grandfather growing up, fishing and spending time in the woods. Does that sound like, what if you pitched that person?
Yep, that'd be good.
Better, right? So thanks, Michael. Appreciate you going through that with me. This is the exercise I call believer matching. So believer matching is this idea that there is like a perfect profile of investor that you'd want to pitch. And your job isn't like, we're going to go, Michael, you should try to find those investors. Like, you're going to go out and maybe see if they're environmentally minded investors and, ask people about their interest in oysters or whatever. And you'll definitely try to find those investors, perfect investor. But your goal is not going to be only pitch perfect investors. Your goal is going to be, can I convince a generalist investor that my business is exciting enough that they should invest in it? And one of the ways that you can help tell that story and get people excited, the same way Michael would pitch an investor that loves oysters, grew up in the Pacific Northwest, traveled the world finding seafood, and went fishing and hunting growing up. What you're going to do is think to yourself, well, what is it that makes that investor perfect? What is it about it? And then what you want to do is think, okay, I want to distill those elements. What are the things that they know that makes the rest of my pitch like go, oh my God, that's amazing. Take those out and think about how we would put those early on. How can we get everyone to the same level that your perfect believer is at before you even start talking? And if you can do that, the rest of your pitch is going to go way better. So whether it's, what we talked about with Bill in terms of menopause and cancer, it's like, I'm not an expert in that. An expert in menopause and, sorry, just really messing this up. An expert in menopause and cancer would know how uncomfortable menopause is, would know the severe risk of cancer, et cetera. But I don't know that. And I need to know that in order to get excited about something that Bill's doing. So that's the idea of believer matching. This is less important for a general consumer-based business that everyone kind of understands. But if you are even lightly niched or lightly technical, you need to be thinking about this process when you think about telling the story of your company and your opportunity. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go a little bit faster because It's already 7:07. The nod along effect. This is this idea of building momentum within a pitch. You want to tell a story in a way that gets someone to say yes, and then yes again, and then yes again, then nod and nod and nod, until the very end. You conclude at this belief and this thought where they don't say, I want to invest. What do they say? Ken Morimoto. What do you think they say at the end of that? They're saying yes and yes and yes. What's the end of that?
Wait, I'm sorry. When you say yes, yes, yes for.
All right, I'm gonna ask Larry. Larry, you go.
Right.
They're watching you. They're watching you pitch, and you get a yes and a yes and a yes and a bigger nod and nod and nod. What's the conclusion you're driving towards?
A term sheet. Like getting a term sheet.
No. So it's not. It's I want to learn more. Like, you guys have to understand that your presentation, your first pitch, is not going to win the day, is not going to get money right away. And anyone that thinks that is probably going to run the pitch in a really awkward way and really kind of drive towards something that it's not meant to do. You're trying to get people to go, yes, yes, yes. Wow. Wing, this is really interesting. I need to get someone else to look at this with me. I need to ask you more questions after this meeting. What messes that up is anything that breaks the nod along effect. And so when I talk about breaking the nod along effect, it's something that's overly complicated, something that I don't understand. So I'm like, you get to a slide and I don't understand, or a slide that has so much detail on it that I need to like stare at it and try to deconstruct the information and understand what's in there. Or, something that's just like incredibly hard to agree with. All those things will break momentum and break the nod along effect. So test the nod along effect in your story with people and see where people break, see where people are like spending too much time on a slide. Probably means you need to change something up or simplify something. Okay. Less is more. So a lot of people will come to me with slides that are 20, 25, 30 slides. And I always tell people they should have a 10 slide goal. In fact, I believe that the longer a deck is, the longer a presentation is, the less I believe that the founder really knows why their company exists. Like, they feel like they need to tell me 50 different things about why it's kind of interesting in 50 different ways. And I cringe because I remember building my deck and being like, I kind of have to put this in there because this is a little bit interesting. And I also have to add this in there because if they don't like this, then maybe they'll like this. The best founders and the best companies could do it in less than 10 slides because they know so deeply why this is important. And they'll say it and boom, 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 done. And if I do that well, 10 slides might be short, but it's enough to get someone to go, oh, interesting. It's not enough. I want to learn more. I want to learn more. I want to learn more. So one of the best ways to do that is through addition by subtraction. If you have a deck that is 20 slides long, you should be cutting away and cutting away and cutting away and cutting away until you get to something that is iconic, that means something. Don't fall into the trap of adding more and like not feeling like you can cut anything. If you're in that place, that's a red flag. It's a red flag. It's kind of like the purity of motivation. It's like all these things that, to me, scream, this is not a founder that knows why they're here. Okay, so that's addition by subtraction.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between a deck that is the deck for a presentation and the deck that is an introduction deck that you're throwing in to a room that they're going to read?
There are different philosophies behind this. And so it sounds like, John, you and I differ on this. I'm pretty consistent. I know some people have an intro deck and then a longer deck, whatever. I have a core deck that I try to target 10 slides. I have infinity appendix slides, which will get added to a deck that I send after a presentation. But I'm like, I think I can make something really simple in 10 slides that can be sent over, but can also stand on its own and can be presented over top of, but that's just me.
We get these decks that are intended to be read, which they then use in their pitch, which is then way too many words.
Yeah. And that sort of breaks the nod along effect, right? Anyone trying to go through that deck will not be nodding along. They'll be staring at the first slide for 5 minutes. And does anyone know how long an investor on average spends looking at a deck the first time you send it over? Any guesses? You want to throw it in the chat? Everyone's seen this answer.
30 seconds.
It's about 2.5 minutes. That number changes. DocSend was one of my sponsors, so I know this data very well. It's anywhere between 2.5 and call it 4 minutes, depending on the market. It went down to 2.5 minutes over 2020 and 2022. So if you think a really, really dense deck that has a lot of words is going to make more of an impact on an investor, you're wrong. They don't spend almost any time with a deck. Okay. Last, we need to go through this. This is very important. Preparation and process. So this is a quote that I always tell people when we talk about preparation. It's Abraham Lincoln. It's funny because I give this presentation to accelerators around the world and LATAM, and it's always funny to reference somebody that I don't know, but all of you know this. Given 6 hours to chop down a tree, I would spend the first 4 hours sharpening my axe. Super important within fundraising. What I tell people is the fundraisers that you see in the news, that you hear about from friends that were the shortest, likely took the longest to prepare for. So think about that. Okay, raise your hand. Who here has already pitched before and has gotten a no? I know it's not Michael because people are chasing Michael to buy his company. Let's see. Let's go with Ken Allgood. Can you come on? Hey, Ken. So you pitched before and you've gotten a no?
Yeah, actually from Seattle Angel Conference.
Awesome.
But,
how did it feel when John told you no?
Well, didn't tell me no directly. He told me no via email, and
Okay.
We simply didn't make it to the next round. And how did it feel? That I had not conveyed our mission and our belief in what we're doing and how we're bringing change. I felt like I obviously needed to work on the process and on my pitch.
So I hear disappointment. Is that a good?
Oh yeah, no, that would be completely reasonable. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I'd love to. There are 10 hands. I'd love to hear everyone describe it. We don't have enough time. The fact is, disappointment is probably the euphemism of the century. It's like you're trying to bring something that you really, really believe in, something that you dreamed about to life, and you need money, and someone saying no is like insulting your baby, right? Sucks. In fact, it feels like a punch to the stomach, right? And I always show people this. It's like this Mike Tyson quote of everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that is fundraising, and that is no's. Confidence in fundraising is one of the most important elements of fundraising. And if you don't have a process, every no that you get is going to feel like you got stabbed in the back. And so you know how hard it is to get to the next meeting a couple of days later and pick yourself up if you have a knife in your back and gotten punched in the stomach and feel like your company is amazing. That's really hard. But if you build a process, you can become a little bit more bulletproof, a little bit more invincible to do things like that. So process is super important. I'm going to describe this thing about why process is important. This is this idea of investor poker. Hopefully some of you have played Texas Hold'em. You understand this idea. When does an investor place her bet? She's thinking about, if we think about investing like poker, does she invest now pre-flop? Does she invest after the flop and there's, pretty good flop, ace out there? The answer to this is that they will continue to wait and see the next card unless you force them to bet otherwise. They will never see a good hand and be like, oh, I'll invest now, if they think they can see the next card. So if you don't run a process, you will always get the answer that I'm sure everyone that raises their hand no, probably heard a version of this. You know what, Ken? You're a little too early. Larry, sorry, you're a little too early. You know, would love to see more. And it's because they don't think they didn't get excited, and they think they can see the next card. So the thing that helps you battle this is process. And what we want to do is help you avoid what I think is the most common fundraising mistake. The most common fundraising mistake is running a process that looks like this. It's, let's see, let me use some more names here. It's Niraj going out and saying, you know what? Oh, Alex Alviar. I know Alex. Alex is an investor. Let me go pitch him. Here, I'm pitching. Okay. That didn't work out. Emily. Okay, let's see if I can pitch Emily. Like pitching Emily and seeing how it goes. And then it's, you know, just trying to get introductions to anyone else. The first two people I pitched passed. If you're not on mute, if you're mute,
I'll
please.
mute them.
This is the most common fundraising mistake in the world. And what you're doing is creating these piecemeal processes that are standing on their own and have no additional pressure to make people decide. In fact, so if they don't have any pressure, they're just going to say you're too early and they want to see the next card. So come back to me when you have more progress. So this is one of the things we talk about when it comes to fundraising processes. It's like this. It's a single arrow is easily broken, but a bundle of 10 is not. And that is why you create a process when it comes to fundraising. You want to bundle these processes so they're not easily broken. And the term that I'm most known for is this idea of calendar density. So when you're setting up a process, what you're trying to avoid is a loose process with, you know, one thing that ends and another thing that starts and then ends, and then another thing that starts and ends. What you're trying to do is run a process that launches all at a very similar time so that you get all your first meetings landing in a very similar, very densely packed area within your calendar. That is calendar density. So how do you do that? Well, essentially, you get all of your potential intros to investors bundle up, not the actual intros, just the potential intros. And then you choose a date and you go out all at once. You ask for the intros all at once, because if you ask for them all at once, then they'll all land in a calendar in a very similar area, and you'll have achieved one of the most important things that helps you run a process, which is calendar density. Let's see.
So I want to dive into that a little bit. In the Seattle area, we have about 64 entities that invest in pre-seed and seed. 9 of them are angel groups that are public. And what we normally see is they sort of hit Madrona and then they walk their way down to us. And we're sort of the earliest of the earliest. I'd almost say pre-seed, but earliest program is the Seattle Angel Conference. And then Grub Stakes, and then Sea Change Fund, and then Swan Ventures, and then, you know, and then it goes up. And about halfway up is Puget Sound Venture Club and Alliance of Angels and Kretsu, who are on the top half, right? And when you watch where they write their checks, they're fundamentally different places where Grub Stakes and Seattle Angel Conference write their checks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have done some level of filtering, prioritizing, and straining of the investor pool so that you're getting the right kinds of company investment groups to pay attention to you, right? You can't just hit everybody that's on the list, mainly because by the time you've gotten halfway down the list, you've gotten all of those people to say no, and then you're not going to get to go back to them in the next year.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I think it's, you know, you don't talk to anyone and everyone. You have to do some filtering and understand that they are appropriate for your industry and stage. But if you do it one by one, you're setting yourself up for a very, very difficult and long process. That is the definition of bleeding out. It's taking one and failing, and then taking one and failing, and hoping, just praying. It's hope as a strategy, which is not a strategy. It's just hoping that you thread the needle and happen to stumble on an investor that just completely understands what you're doing without the pressures and signals that running a process does.
Right. So we're working on a pitch deconstruction set of workshops that we'll do this summer. We'll have a meet the funders where we'll try to get as many of those 9 angel groups in the room as we can. And our goal is that by the time people get through the angel conference, at least the finalists and sometimes the semifinalists now have a surface area with those other groups to leap into their stuff. What I'm surprised with is how little social media help I get from the participants of the process. They do not take the opportunity to help us tell their story on social media. Can you talk about that? You know, if you've got these arrows going someplace, where are you leaving the content of that somewhere?
Are you talking about the process or just like pre-marketing yourself?
So I do that calendar density thing and I've got a bunch of stuff going. There's some things I'm legally not able to talk about, but there ought to be some digital footprint that I'm doing in some way that make people aware of me so that I can carry that momentum forward, right? So like being a participant in Seattle Angel Conference is a great non-investment thing to say out loud on social media for the next group of angels that are being invited to the demo day.
Well, I mean, there's a difference between, running a fundraise and being a private company investment. You can tweet that I'm fundraising. Anyways, it's neither here nor there, but you should be creating a process where you can control information and allow people to understand what type of company you are. I don't necessarily think any company needs to document the process that's happening because you're actually trying to control that a little bit. But like we talked about before, there should be some sort of what you call digital exhaust or some surface area to learn more about a company. Because if I meet Mike Seo and I think he's interesting, it's one meeting, I'm going to start, or if someone even puts him on my radar, in order for me to get excited, I need to learn more about him. And if I can't learn more about him by, finding social media posts, if I can't find more about him because other people know him and I can ask about him, it's going to be very hard for me to really, really build momentum towards an investment. So I think maybe what John is saying is there's a lot of different things that go into getting investors educated enough to make an investment. And some of that is creating content. The one thing that I wanted to touch on before maybe leaving 5 minutes for Q&A, because we started a little bit late, is just how important introductions are. And the idea is that, like, as an investor, I'm trying to find diamonds in the rough. I'm trying to find great things. And it's a system with incomplete information. That is what early stage investing is. And in systems with incomplete information, it's social dynamics and trust and relationship that really fill in the gaps. And so you can complain all you want about not having the network or not being able to get to investors, but it exists for a reason, because there's really there are very few other ways to get smart quickly and get comfortable enough to make an investment without that. And so what I would encourage you, what I always tell people is that, I show them this, which is, you might think that you're really far away from an investor, but you're probably closer to their network than you think, just by virtue of the fact that you're an entrepreneur. So you can probably get to somebody in their network, and it takes you a couple hops, but you should be building your relationships and building your network now in order to be able to fundraise in the near term, and later down the road, you're going to be doing this for many, many, many years. So this is work that it's not a consumable. It doesn't just go away. Like it compounds. So build your network, build your relationships. It's going to help you get to intros that really get the process to run. And then, I'm skipping around here a bit, but the last thing I'll say about process, which is super important, is that it's a process and it needs to be managed. It doesn't just happen on its own, because people that are making introductions are very busy people. Their job isn't to make introductions. The fact that they can make a really great introduction for you probably means they're super busy, which means you have to be on top of these things and follow up and ask and schedule and manage. And investors are incredibly busy people that are easily distracted. So realize that this is a process that needs to be managed. So hopefully this was helpful for you. I wish I could stay longer. This has been very fun, but I do want to promote two things that if you enjoyed this talk, could be valuable for you. So the kinds of things that we talked about here, I go really deep every week in my newsletter, which is on the left, and my podcast Funded and the back channel, they're in the same feed. One is very sort of inspirational, educational, and the other is 5-minute mini podcast posts about the stuff that I'm talking about. Like I go and talk about very specific concepts and help you guys understand how you utilize them in your own fundraising process. So I'm going to stop right there. I'm at Yeh on Twitter, in case you guys want to follow me. I have 5 minutes before I have to leave, unfortunately. Do we want to do a quick Q&A, John? Okay, you're muted, but it's okay. If anyone wants to raise their hand, happy to answer questions.
Yeah, great idea. And I'll stick around for afterwards if you want to have a group discussion about stuff. I also would suggest to folks that the 3 dots in the bottom of the chat, you can save the chat, and that'll save a bunch of this material for you. So questions, yeah.
Larry.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I popped it in the chat here, and it is that, so in addition to calendar density, which I completely understand, I've had to do that in a different sales capacity. Do you have any other useful constructs that give, like a dead end, like it's, hey, the funding round is over here, not a false one, you're not making stuff up, but some other construct that puts a boundary on it so there is a sense of urgency?
Okay. So I was just trying to answer one of your other questions. But no, that's fine. Yes, I think I actually have an illustration around deadlines. Without deadlines, deadline is an incredibly valuable tool for anything, including fundraising. But it's like someone could say, I'll get to that as soon as possible. And as soon as possible could mean anything. But the moment you give some sort of timeline to it, it allows someone to organize it and put it into a stack of priorities. And so, yeah, I think deadlines are really important. It's a bit of a art in order, because you touched on it. You can't give a false deadline necessarily, but deadlines can also move, right? Like you can tell people we have a lot of interest and it looks like we're going to close the round 2 weeks from now. We'd love to hear back from you by then. And what happens if someone comes in, Larry, what happens if someone comes in and says, I want to invest, but I can't invest except 3 days after your deadline? What do you do?
Good question.
I'll save you a slot.
Yeah, you move the deadline. You accept the money. These deadlines are like, they exist, but they kind of don't exist. That there's a bunch of like gamesmanship. I think the line that I give founders is, I will play the game all the way to the edge and jump into the gray zones, but I draw the line at lying. You can't lie, or I can't lie. You guys can lie if you want, but if you get caught in lying, that's going to be like the death of your reputation. Yeah. And so we will use any sort of verbiage that I can explain away, something changed or whatever. But if you say Sequoia is leading the round and they go call and they're like, Sequoia doesn't even know who you are, you just totally made that up. Like no one is ever going to trust you again. Okay. Carly.
Yeah, on the sort of front loading stuff to get your people to the true believer stage, which I thought was really good advice, but how do you think of that in terms of background info? How much are you explaining the space? How much is too much info to give there, and versus just getting into the actual pitch of your project?
Impossible for me to answer in such generalities.
Yeah. How do you think about it, I guess, is the
yeah. I mean, I think you're trying to do it in one slide. And, like 1 or 2 things that gets them just dangerous enough where they can follow along. Like, and it's going to be hard for you. Honestly, it's going to be hard for you to do this without getting feedback. Everyone here is too close to their business to do it simply. Cause like, you're just going to be like, well, this is important. This thing about art is really important. And so I have to include it. And somebody from outside of your business is going to be like, Carly, that's not important. Kick that out, kick that out, kick that. Oh, that's the one thing that's important. So don't do this in a vacuum. Don't do this on your own. Create a draft and get some feedback. David.
Yeah, Jason, thanks for today. Yeah, just a quick question. You know, I've always run into this where you always are waiting for the next MVP or the next thing you're working on. And is it ever too early? If, let's say I haven't met an investor yet, this is my first time meeting them, and I can meet, let's say next Tuesday, or I know my MVP will be ready in 3 weeks, and then there'll be customer feedback. Do I hold off on that meeting or do I take it?
I mean, so I'd highly recommend everyone try to create relationships early. Like the best investors and the best fundraisers don't happen shotgun style. Even if you think they are, they're usually investors that have met you before. So without knowing all the details in terms of when you need money, et cetera, like take a meeting and just try to set up in a way that it's not a formal pitch, spend time with them, ask them ask for advice, just don't sell. And then you'll have a connection into them the next time when you're ready to go out. Then it'll be much more comfortable to figure out a way into them, either directly emailing them or getting introed again.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I've learned not to put all my eggs into one meeting.
Of course.
Because it ends up leading to like 7 of them. So,
and by the way, like don't feel embarrassed like that's the feeling. It's just, there is so much anxiety and pressure around your first meetings, especially if you've ever done this before. You feel like, oh my God, I have this one shot of this one investor that I finally met, and now like I gotta like squeeze it and hold it, and then you end up accidentally strangling it and killing the process. That's like a Dumb and Dumber reference. It's like
so there has been a tweet thing going on a little bit about how hard it is to find investors. And I find that surprising given the amount of breadth, right? So David is treating investors as a rare commodity when we have hundreds and hundreds that are out visibly in the region, right? So how would you characterize the ability to go find an investor contact?
I mean, there are so many tools out there that will get you the names. I mean, the easiest one, which I'm like always shocked whenever I teach this, is that LinkedIn search allows you to put in the word investor or angel investor or venture capitalist, and then allows you to filter by second degree connections and allows you to put in common connections. That's like, everything already. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, it doesn't mean that it's like instant. Like you don't all of a sudden just have all these intros that come in. Stuff takes work, takes time, but it's definitely out there. And it's not that like venture capitalists aren't trying to get discovered. So they're not necessarily hiding. It takes a little bit of elbow grease, if you will. I have to,
if everybody connects with Jason or connects.
Oh yeah, please follow me. By the way, I always tell people I get an insane number of LinkedIn requests that I don't accept. But if you find me on LinkedIn and you just say that you were part of the Seattle Angel presentation, I'd be happy to connect with you. And please follow me on Twitter. Please listen to my podcast, subscribe to my newsletter. I promise you it'll be helpful. And I hope to see a lot of your companies thrive throughout this interesting time in the market. And John, thanks again for inviting me. It's super fun.
Yeah, lovely to have you here. Thank you so much. And I'll stay and answer questions if people want to have a conversation. Thanks so very much, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
Appreciate it.
So anybody have other questions that they want to talk about?
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought.
You mentioned that you could save the chat, all the stuff, but I can't find the button. What
Yeah,
did you
down
say
in the
three
bottom
dots?
of the chat, you should see 3 little dots at the bottom of the chat where you put your message in on the right-hand side, at least on my screen. There's the chat. There is a investor in town, Untapped Ventures, Yohei Nakamura, who's just built the thing called Deal Flow Digest that is trying to connect angels to, or connect investors to startups. There's the link in the chat. Yeah, if you click on that and put your thing in, they'll try to match you with people that match whatever. but there's a lot of opportunity in town just to meet people in normal processes. So Nebula Creative, what's your thought?
Hi, John. You can call me Rojani. That's my first name. Nebula Creative is my company. So I have a question because I've run into a few opportunities to pitch for investors, and majority of them are pretty happy with what they are hearing, and they're excited about what I'm doing and what the company is doing. And then it goes on for like maybe a month or two, and some of them even went over like a year. And at the end of the day, they keep bringing up the fact that we're in a different economy, some kind of financial crisis, and unstable crisis that's going on with everybody. And so they keep bringing it up at the end of the day. And I'm curious if that's like a real thing for them to be thinking or to be bringing that up to us, or is it
I
something
suspect that you are asking the wrong people who are actually not in the right flow, right? It is true that when the stock market goes down, a bunch of people will get nervous about their net worth and they will slow down on their investing. That's exactly the wrong thing for them to do, in my opinion. So long as they have the wealth and they like the asset class, when the market goes down is when the best companies get created. And so now's a great time to be investing rather than a bad time to be investing. We are sort of, angel investing anyway, is counter-cyclical to the stock market in several ways, because a lot of people get out of it and then you get to pick the good deals because there's good deals. But in general, what he was talking about was, setting up a process, and as part of the early angel process, as opposed to the venture capital process, right? So what size of a check do you want?
what size of the seat?
Check. Yeah. What check size do you want? Someone says, I'll write you a $100,000 check. Is that too big, too small, just right?
That's actually, it's a workable size that could get us to the next milestone. And what we have been working on is that because of these.
So you are early and you are pre-institutional. And so for the most part, you can't get venture money at that size, right? If you do, it's just warm-up money that you're getting, with the exception that the micro VCs are really happy to write somewhere around $50,000 to $100,000 checks. So filtering your audience for what size check they normally write and the kind of check they write is probably a first step to get there. And you're looking for people that are regularly writing checks in general, or you're looking at helping a friend learn how to write their first check. And they're writing based on relationship, not based on their profession, right? And so I think we have 9 angel groups. Most of them are networks. There are probably, I would say, somewhere around 1,500 people in Seattle that are connected to those networks that are writing checks on a regular basis that are publicly available. I think there's even more people that are privately writing checks that are not publicly available, that you have to know somebody who knows somebody to get there. But as Jason was saying, you can get a really long way by using LinkedIn to search for angel investor in Seattle that is 2 connections away from you. And you might be surprised how many of those people are around. And then sort them based on, probability that they're willing to have a conversation with you and give you advice on how to be ready for taking money. Yeah. Is that useful? All right.
Yeah.
Sudhakar, I see your hand up.
Yes, sir. Thank you, John. So 2-part question, I think, in terms of the calendar density sort of process, running a process. So typically when you start talking about your company, you find that some things work, some things don't work, and you want to tweak it. so on. So wouldn't it
Always.
be wise? Sorry?
Always.
Yes. And so wouldn't it be wise for you to start with the low risk sort of angels where, or venture capitalists, wherever you want money, but at least try to see what might actually resonate, and then start to build up a process rather than just go all at once. Is that something built into that calendar density
Well,
process?
I think that you missed a subtlety about what he was talking about.
Mhm.
I think you should not go to all 64 of the groups in town that do money all at once and create calendar density. I think you should filter them into clusters and try to find those. And then in those clusters, there's, not 9 angel groups, but there's 1,500 angels, right? And it's the 1,500 angels who you want to build relationship with. And when you're going after, my valuation is 3 million and I'm looking for 250K of check, that's a certain stage that certain ones of them will do just fine and others will not work with you at all, right? And so find the ones that are correct, right? And then take the ones that you really want their money, because it's not their money you want, it's their expertise and introductions and all of the other things you want, and go after them as you are prepared, right? Get very prepared to be doing a great job with them. So when they ask you about your financial, so I just had a conversation today. How many sales do you have to make to be cash flow positive? Seems like an obvious thing that you should understand about your business.
Yeah.
Your number one goal as a startup at the beginning is to get cash flow positive as fast as you possibly can so that you can survive. At least that's my bottom up view, which means that you have to have a target in mind, which means that you need to know how many times I have to turn the crank on my business engine for me to get there. And if you don't know what that is because your financial model is floppy, you're not ready to go talk to the ones you really want, right? And so there's that kind of work to do. And so talk to angel groups that will help you survive that and help you tighten that up.
Perfect.
And so that doesn't mean go to a Madrona. That means go 2 steps down before Madrona until you're ready to be ready for what they want to provide.
Yeah. Yep. Good. Thank you.
Rishab.
Yeah. Hi. So what are some milestones that we should try to achieve before going investing, looking for investments, like legality?
Well, so the Techstars mantra is team, market size, traction, idea, in that order, right? So when you're at the Techstars level where they're accepting you into their accelerator, that's what they say that they're looking for. And so do you have a team that covers the core skill sets that you need, and can they play nice with each other? Because team is the number one failure point. Does the market size make sense? And do you understand it enough that we believe you? And is that market engaging with you in a way that is meaningful, right? Which to me means in the lean startup, I'm doing customer discovery before I'm doing product development. Means that I have a content strategy that's telling people about the problem, engaging people in the problem, and I have an audience that's being built that is the highly filtered audience that I will then ask, hey, I have this thing that's going to solve this problem this way. Do you care? And they're filtered down to people that they have the problem, they know they have the problem, they've tried to fix it, they're unhappy, and they're still willing to spend money to solve the problem. That group of people, you have their phone numbers and email addresses, and you've seen them face to face because you're doing Zoom calls and stuff. And now that group, when you say, hey, what if I did this? Would that help? And they go, oh, yes, let's do that, right? That's what they're looking for. And that all can happen before you make the product. So when you're talking about milestones, often people think of them as technical milestones. I need to have the MVP done. I need to have sold 10, blah, blah, blah. It's very likely that what you are looking for when you use the word milestones for investors is that you are changing the valuation of your company. And so when I do this action and I complete the action, how did that impact the value of my company? So I put a bunch of money in, you take that money and you pay off a loan. Didn't do anything to solve the value of the company. In fact, maybe made the value of the company go down. So you take the money, you put it in there, you pay for operations. What does that do to the value of the company? Again, doesn't really do anything. I put money in and I triple my sales. Well, a lot of the MBA things are based, MBA valuations of companies are based on sales. And so now maybe I did something like tripled or maybe even more than tripled because of my growth rate, maybe more than tripled the value of my company, because now I have predictable customer acquisition costs that I can tell you about, right? So the milestones, when we as investors use the term milestone, it may not be the same thing that the technical guy uses when they say milestone, where they mean I got that feature working. Building more features may have no impact on sales.
I see. So even if you're looking for investments, it is okay to just have the product ready before launching it as well, right? While we are raising funds.
So let me be very blunt. Products without customers who care about them are not useful. So if you've gone in the garage for the last 2 years and you built the thing and nobody's ever played with it and there's nobody knocking on your door asking for it, then it's not time to go raise money yet.
Okay.
You need to go get people engaged in, team, market size, traction. Then we can talk about the thing.
Okay. All right.
Larry.
Oh, sorry. Did you say me, John?
I did.
Yeah. So within your definition of a milestone, as you just described, we just got an LOI, a letter of intent, for spending between $100,000 and $200,000 a year through our platform. Would that be considered a milestone?
Some people like that. I am less interested in those because letters of intent don't have any teeth in them. But it's evidence, and some people are willing to do that level of evidence. I would love a prepayment check.
Yeah, they're actually doing that. They're actually doing, they're doing that too.
Here's my first $10,000, put it on my account, ready to go. Hallelujah. I'll take cash.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Carly.
Thanks.
Yeah, since we touched on it a couple of times, I was curious how you think about the line between seed and Series A or angel and VC money. Obviously, there's a lot of opinions on that, but
angel and VC money is really easy. Angels are investing their own money for no fees, and we pay fees. We don't get fees. And for venture, they're investing other people's money, and they're getting a piece of the action based on just getting the money raised. So they're typically taking a 2 and 20. So 2% of the fund every year comes to them as cash. So they're getting a salary, which means that they think about the world in fundamentally different ways with fundamentally different goals and the fundamentally different investment objectives. So different worlds, which lead to surprisingly different capacities for that investor to invest in this particular startup. So you have to model them separately. It's important to recognize that we have micro VCs, and there's a lot of micro VCs coming on the market right now, which are people investing other people's money at small check sizes. So I would argue that seed and pre-seed and Series A are really size of check in a sense. And size of check is a weird, mushy thing, but being old-fashioned, apparently, I think pre-seed is sort of like that very first money that you get where you're getting a small check, 500 or 50,000 to 200,000, somewhere in there, that gets you up to something significant and going. Maybe you're pre-product market fit a little bit, but in this land of internet where you can, talk to 1 billion people with, 2 keystrokes, you ought to have engagement with someone about the problem before you start looking for other people's stuff. That's just, it's too easy to find people today to not have done customer interviews. But given that you've done customer interviews and you found a real problem and people are going, oh my God, it hurts, take my money. Even if that's take my money to tell me about the other people who are solving the problem, right? You can sell a map of everybody else's existing competitive matrix that's out there because people have to know what's out there, right? That's something you can actually sell, right? There's dozens of things you can sell that are not your product that will prove that they're willing to spend money to solve the problem, which is the key measurement, right? If I go and talk to random people on the street and I get feedback that says, that's really cool, you should have this little widget on it, the chances of that widget actually being useful to you are near zero. If you go into a room where there's 10 people that are like burning with the problem and they need it solved right today and ready to spend $1,000 today to solve the problem, and they tell you that this widget is important for them to write that $1,000 check, you know that it changes their willingness to buy the product or not. You know that that's going to be important. So that customer development work you should be doing early. Given that, pre-seed is the first check-in that is probably individuals, it's probably family members, people with relationships. And that early part of team is also relationship driven kind of thing. And then seed is the, we're pretty close to being product market fit. We have really good evidence of that. Maybe we're taking a $750K check in total for the round. And then maybe it gets up to 1.5 million, maybe. And angels and angel groups have a hard time getting above 1 million. It's just really hard. And then you get to institutional money, which has a really hard time to write a check below 5 million, right? And so there's these places where it's easy to get a check and there's places where it's hard to get a check. And
I asked the question because I feel like I'm falling in that area right now.
So it's better for you to do 2 or 3 rounds at 200K than it is for you to try to raise 1 round at 3 million. Right? You'll be able to take a milestone that doubles the valuation and do that at 200 or 500K and make that go, and then raise another 500K and make that go, and sort of stair step your way up to things. And again, if you get the cash flow positive early and use this to just crank up your size and then improve the margin on your product, and you're stair stepping from cash flow positive, cash flow positive, cash flow positive, then you can make it through that gap without any trouble. If you're trying to survive getting eyeballs so that you can get more eyeballs, so you can get more eyeballs so that you can become Facebook or Google or whatever, then that requires preloading the relationships with the venture people in a way that's a fundamentally different process, right? So you have to decide if you're an earner or a burner, and then stack the deck accordingly. No?
That was useful.
So Rigani, did I remember the name right? Yeah, you had your hand up.
Just kind of follow up with that. I was also told by one of the investors that they wanted to help me raise the full thing, like the whole entire thing, so that we don't have to go back and fundraise in every milestone.
Yeah.
Because it's operating and fundraising together is kind of too much for that.
It is. It's more than 2 jobs. Yep.
So that's what he's, I don't know if that's, again, like, it's just something that
So it's entirely possible to kill a startup by giving them too much money. So you should take enough money for the next milestone. And if they want to give you a promise of a lot of money, lay out the tranches of that and tell them when you'll call on the money. Right? Just don't take it all at once. Don't take the money until you get to the milestone where you're being effective and efficient with it. We've watched people kill their company by not being financially disciplined. Now, Larry had a "what are you talking about? When there's money on the table, take it" kind of look on his face. And so clearly there are people that, take a bunch of money and then put it in the bank and don't use it. But it's far more likely that if you take too much money that you will mess up your flow because you're not being efficient. And it's better for you to be efficient. Larry, you had your hand up.
I did, John, because that was an moment, not a
Okay.
not a WTH moment. So
Mhm.
yeah, thank you.
Okay,
That's all.
Nathan? You're on mute.
I'm sorry. I'm a CEO of a startup and a tech startup, and I don't know how to use the hand signal. So we're a SaaS startup. And what we're building is it's a complicated MVP, but we've actually built an MVP. It's clunky, but it's usable. We've pitched to multiple investors, and frequently it always seems like the stacking of the deck, or what Josh was saying, kind of like this. Don't give any more wiggle room. And where we're at right now is they're going, well, let's go out there and do a closed beta and show that everybody will use the product. And it's an engagement product for physical therapists, personal trainers. It's telehealth. Now that we have that built, it's at what point in time?
So what I just heard you say is I did not do adequate customer discovery work.
Okay, so that's fair.
That's what I heard. What that means is you have to go back and do the customer discovery work. They, team, market size, traction, then the idea. So what are you telling them in terms of attraction? In terms of traction?
Well, I guess
we have 150,000 people signed up in our pre-beta. Right? No.
Yeah.
How many people paid you to be in the pre-alpha release?
The pre-alpha, exactly. And so one of the things we had to do was build the MVP, the alpha, so that we could.
Okay, so stop using the word MVP because you're not using it the way that Eric Ries wrote it in his book, and now it's just a glob of crap that I built. That's what it means when you say it the way you're using it.
Gotcha.
So you got a bunch of technology that you put together and you put people in front of it for your pre-alpha.
Yes.
Okay, and that technology they paid for.
Yes.
Okay, so you had paying customers that were telling you, I have to have this feature.
Yeah, well, not the feature, but they're wanting to use the product that we have built. Yes. The MVP.
Right, so they paid you for playing with your technology before you had features locked down.
Yes, even though we're losing money on it, they are saying that because of the fact that we have these things, the cameras working the way that we have them working, they are saying, yes, we will use this.
And they paid you.
Yes, they're separating.
And now you've locked down your features and you've got your prototype and you're doing your alpha release and your pre-beta, post-alpha, right? And you're mostly clear on the feature set and it mostly sort of works, but you're willing to move it around. People came in and paid you for that.
Yes, for the
very. And the number of people that are in the first group and the number of people that are in the second group is bigger.
Oh, not yet, because we're still in that very early stage of just.
Did you have 10 people in your pre-alpha?
25.
Okay. Do you have 200 in your pre-beta?
Yes, or
okay.
even more. Yes.
Okay. So then, what are they talking about?
Well, the biggest thing about
you've got exponential growth in your product development process. You started with 25 pre-alpha. You did 200 more for your post-alpha. You're now doing a paid beta where the features are functionally locked down and all you're trying to do is get the crappy bugs out of the way. And
no, we're not even to the feature set. We're going into that feature set, but that's what where we're at right now is we're going into.
So we're not using the words the right way then.
Okay.
So I think of alpha as my first release of the software that sort of proves that it has what I need. Right?
Okay.
It's a conceptual proof of concept, right? It mostly works around the things, but some of the important stuff may be missing. And I'm trying to figure out what features I need to nail down.
Okay.
And I'm going through my customers and my alpha people, my pre-alpha people, and they say, in order for me to write the PO for this thing, I need to have blah. And this is this is mandatory. This one is optional. If that's great, this is there, it's great. I'm going to be really happy, but I won't pay you for it, right? And you sort your features into what has to be there versus what doesn't have to be there. And then you build that and get it tight in your post-alpha pre-beta, which is, did you really mean sort of like this? And then they say yes, in the core group of those 25 said yes.
Right.
And then you say to the 250, hey, we're going to do this with these features, and we want you to run it and prove that it sort of does what you want. And then they start telling you, again, the mandatory.
Right, those levers.
And then you lock the features down and you do the beta, which basically says, except for the nasty, gnarly bug crap, this is the product.
Right, yes.
Okay, so you're in beta.
Well, yeah, it's a closed beta. I mean, we're not opening it yet.
No, I didn't say open yet.
Oh, okay, yes.
But you've got the features locked down and you know what the core mandatory features are, and you
Yes.
have a development path for what the delighters and added features are going to be when you open it up for version 3.5. But right now you're on version 1.7 or 0.17.
0.17, yes.
And you have 2,000 people lined up that are going, oh my God, I have to have this. And they paid you $10 to stand in line.
No, we've not asked them to pay to stand in line, but that's a great point. We could absolutely do that, yes.
So then you tell them, we had 25 people in the pre-alpha. They helped us and they were excited, and our conversion rate with that was 80%. We had 250 people in our pre-beta, and we had a conversion rate of this percent for going to the next stage. We've got a line of 2,000 people waiting in line. They paid us $10 to wait in line so we could do the release. Our release is, N months away. They've still paid us. You have customer development, you have traction. And if they tell you that they want to see people using it, then they're the wrong investors. You should move on.
Okay.
Right?
Perfect.
You've got order of magnitude growth in each of the stages. You're showing exponential growth along the way, right?
What's ironic, it goes right back to, I think that was the lean startup thing, is like grab a small amount, know where you're headed, but grab this tiny amount and then just start to work from there. But
so then the question I would ask you is, how many of those do you have to have for you to be cash flow positive?
To what?
How many sales do you have to have so that everybody being paid a rational amount of money, you are cash flow positive?
Yeah, I mean, we're threading that line, but I think the biggest thing is we're going like, will people separate from their dollar to?
You didn't respond with what I needed.
Okay.
You needed to tell me that at 250 people or at 2,000 people, we're going to be cash flow positive with our current staff, and that's going to then allow us to run for 6 months. And then at the end of 6 months, we're going to do another fundraise because we're going to jump that thing up by another order of magnitude, right? I was sort of giving you the softball for how I was going to drive my capital stack because I knew where my inflection points were.
Okay.
Right. So yep. I would get people to pay you for standing in line for your beta.
Okay.
I would get some clarity about your conversion rate when you make an offer to a physical therapist, what the percentage of them that will come in so that you can create bounding on your cost of customer acquisition.
Okay.
If you cannot tell me plus or minus some number what your cost of customer acquisition is, then you are not yet at
I
product
see
market fit.
Yeah, our CAC is $92, I think $92. But the thing is, once we're rolling with them, yeah, it drops to 40 something per month. But yes,
that's what your spreadsheet says, but that's not reality.
Okay, gotcha.
So I want to know for a fact that I've gotten the last 100 people at $96.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
And the cost of acquisition to get someone to sign up for $10 or $100 or whatever your price is a meaningful number that you measured, even if it's not for the product.
Right. We measured it with 10 people, but that's all within a scope and a realm.
But every week you do it again.
Gotcha.
Put the number in, bound the number and bound the number.
Gotcha. Right. Thank you.
Sure. Any other thoughts that people have?
I have one, if nobody else does. Sorry. So, one of the things that we're thinking about, because originally, we were looking at raising and then, the more that I learn about it, the more that I want to wait till we're profitable. And so for us, that because of our timeline, because of the production, it's 7 months to get our actual stock in because of the whole Ukraine thing. So it's kind of a long time to go. We can make it. Is there any kind of bridge?
Number one place to get money is your customers.
Yeah.
What
Okay.
can you sell them today?
Yeah, we won't have product for 7 months.
This is the monkey trap. Your product is not the important thing. The important thing is your customers have their itch being scratched.
Mhm.
How can you scratch their itch?
Yeah, we've thought about doing Kickstarter, which would help us.
No, Kickstarter has its place, but you have to be very careful with Kickstarter. Kickstarter is only so good as your social media momentum.
Mhm.
And if you do not have 100,000 people on your social media now, you are not ready to do your Kickstarter. So do you have 100,000 people on your social media?
No.
Yeah. So that's not the answer. But how much does it cost you to run a Zoom meeting?
Yeah, nothing. Really.
Could you run a Zoom meeting? Actually, it does cost you. I spend $2,000 a year on Zoom. Can you run a Zoom meeting where your Zoom meeting scratches their itch by taking small groups of people and solving specific problems that are in their way right now that your product will approach solving, that shows you that they are very, very likely to be product users? Could you charge $50 to attend a workshop on how to solve this problem? Get 20 people in the room?
Yeah, I don't.
That's $1,000 per session.
No, I hear you.
That'll pay for the person who's doing the work. That'll get you the name, email address, and what they care about and their demographics and psychographics if you put the right person paying attention to people showing up. And for every 25 people that show up in the room, 2 of them are going to lean in. And you do that often enough that you get, 1,000 people leaning in. And you spend 7 months doing that, generating $1,000 a session. You run the sessions 3 times a week, $3,000 a week.
Yeah, I'll have to
How
think
much money a month do you need for your company to be cash flow positive?
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, it's hard for me to equate just because our product inputs are huge. So because we have to, it's a physical.
The problem for your customers has many solutions, some
Yeah.
of which is a little spray that makes it not itch for the next 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. That was a lot to think about.
So you know what the monkey trap is, yes?
I think you mentioned it
how do you catch a monkey, a live monkey? Nathan knows this one. You have a
multiple times I've done it, so that's
yeah, I've done it.
You have a jar with a thin mouth, and you put a banana in it, and you tie the jar down to the ground so that the jar can't go anywhere. The monkey reaches in the jar, grabs the banana, can't get its hand out of the jar because it's now fat. And because it has the sunk cost of the banana, it will never let go of the banana. And you can just walk up to the monkey and get it. For founders, the product is a monkey trap. You have your hand on the product so hard, you can't even hear what your customers are saying. Your job is not to have your product. Your job is to make your customers feel better in some way. If along the way, your product is the right thing to make them feel better, then hallelujah. Otherwise, you have to learn and figure out what the right thing is to solve their problem.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, Regani.
I could be the last person if you want.
Looks like Larry's going to be the last person.
We finally launched our platform. Finally figured out how to find the money, and we have a product. We have a functioning platform. If you guys want to explore independent films that you haven't seen in your life, you can go to pixquit.com. I can put it on the chat.
Should put it in the chat. Yep. Absolutely. So the real question is, how do you build a social media process so that social media process drives hundreds of thousands of people into your social channel?
Yeah, we have so we This is not my first startup. I started a few other projects before this, and I started everything from nothing, basically just because everything learned from the scratch. And the social media thing is all learned, self-taught kind of thing throughout like the past 5 or 6 years.
It's evolving quickly, so
yes,
it's building tools that are well worth learning how to do.
Yes,
specifically like figuring out how to use LinkedIn scraping and things like that to find the right people. It turns out to be important.
and it's very similar to building the relationships, like creating a relationship between you and the users and you and potential customers. Like you actually put some attention to it and not just like doing a quick
blather does not get you anywhere. That's
right. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do, just to be more human about everything.
Yep. Human without feeding the trolls. Yep. Larry, looks like you get the final question.
Actually, John, it was, thank you. It was an observation. And that is that I used to teach networking skills, and I tell people, stick till the end. You're there anyway, because the people that do stick to the end are serious. They want what they came for. And some of the best nuggets, and frankly, the distillation of the crowd is down to the few that are really serious, and you get some of the best nuggets of the day, evening, whatever it is. And I have gotten those here at this late part tonight. So thank you.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
My wife always complains at me that I'm the last to leave. So
yeah, mine too.
Yep. All right.
Thanks for doing all this, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you.